Next up after Naomi in the teaching puzzle design talk was Ira Fay. He teaches at Hampshire College, which I found out has no grades and they have no majors. So I'm confused about how their program runs, and I'll look into more about that just because I think they're doing something that's different, and I want to wrap my head around it. One thing that Ira mentioned was that you can't reuse playtesters for puzzle design. Because once you want, like in a video game anyway, once someone plays through your video game, they know it. Once you have a crossword puzzle and someone does it, they know how to do it again. So that's something to keep in mind, is that when you're teaching puzzle design, you always want somebody fresh on the play test. It's okay to play test it just to make sure everything functions, but if you're looking for feedback as to like where it's too hard or where it's too easy, or like that fine subtle tuning, you probably want to have a new fresh set of testers. When tweaking puzzles in games, just even a very slight tweak might make it way too hard or way too easy. And so tuning can really move things out of balance. So it's important that if you make any changes to the puzzle, that they are very, very subtle and that each change is play tested. At Hampshire College, Ira has a class where they design escape room games, and that's something that we do also in Game 150. On site, they have a little bit easier time of it because they're all in a group and they can actually use physical space and physical items and that kind of thing. Online, it's a little bit harder. It's more conceptual. So we're looking into figuring out how we can include more of that kind of physical, tactile design. With escape rooms, he said that it's important to limit the amount of reading that people do. Also, if there are small elements, let me get up here, some small elements that one person needs to figure out how they go together to kind of figure out a clue, it might be better to make those larger elements so that the team needs to put them together, avoiding one person solving a part of the puzzle by themselves. Try to keep thinking about bringing the team back into it, and that each escape room needs a very strong theme, so that it's consistent. Like one escape room idea that a student had last semester, this was in Game 150 online, they wanted to create a submarine that was sinking, in that you and your team had to figure out how to get out of it. And I like that because the whole puzzle is centered around the theme of a submarine sinking. Later on Monday, I went to a talk about grant funding for game programs, and by a woman named Tony Pizza from NYU was talking about how the process of going through and getting grants. I know this is super boring because it's not really related to game development. But what I did think was that the grant programs end up creating a lot of bloat that the faculty and staff end up having to create more faculty and staff to manage that whole process, and that somebody's job is just to sit there and write and manage the grant, as opposed to being more focused on the program. But maybe when you don't have funding for the grant programs, or when you don't have funding for a program, that's something that you need to focus on. So later on Monday, I went to a HEGVA party, which is a Higher Education Video Game Alliance party. And they had a little slideshow, and there were a couple tidbits that I thought was worth mentioning and talking about. So they did a study based on graduates of their game-based programs, and that overall people who graduate from game-based programs are having a higher feeling of job satisfaction now than they did in 2015. Which is good news across the industry. The other thing that was really cool is that the game industry is becoming more diverse. There are, instead of 14% of game developers were female, 33% are. So I think that from in 2008. So it's an 11-year gap between those two data points, and it's definitely on the increase, which I thought was really cool. On this slide, this was basically talking about how, like, what other industries people with game development skills can go into. One was chemistry, and I chopped it off. I'm sorry about that, but there were a lot of other industries that students could go into, and also looking at the pay rate or the pay range for various full-time workers. And Gama Sutra usually puts out an industry salary survey every year, and I usually make sure to post that in the online discussion. So I'll post that when it becomes available. One thing that's really cool, and kind of where game development students in other industries where they can apply their knowledge, is in a lot of software manufacturers right now are going into what's called enterprise, which is essentially creating it's game tech as it filters out into the rest of the world to solve real world problems. For instance, I have some friends that created a forklift simulator in VR to train forklift workers. I immediately had an idea of it would be really cool if I could figure out how to drive a tractor in VR before I go rent a tractor. And if I went and rented a tractor, I don't know how to use a tractor, so I'd rent a tractor and I'd spend like a day and a half trying to figure out how to run it and maybe, break something. So I think it would be really cool to kind of figure out those kind of things in VR. Game tech is also moving into the defense space. There's huge defense contractors that are doing lots of stuff in VR with game tech, like the Unreal Engine, Unity, 3D modeling, Maya, Blender. So it's filtering out. So the skills that you're learning, it's really awesome if we can all go and create games, but it's going to be valuable for other industries as well. There was also a really cool food truck at that party called Chairman Bao. If you ever run into a Chairman Bao food truck in San Francisco, I highly suggest you try it out. It was really good.